Hi, this is Dave Mason. You're listening to Everything Fab 4 on Salon.com.
Welcome to Everything Fab 4, a new podcast focused on fun and intelligent stories about the Beatles. I'm your host, Ken Womack, music culture columnist for Salon.com and a Beatles scholar and historian. No other band, or popular phenomenon for that matter, has enjoyed the global impact of the Beatles. They are part of our human fabric. They created an enduring music that brings people together, and just about everyone has their own Beatles story to tell. Some that are surprisingly deep and unexpected. With each episode, we'll be featuring a new guest to share their Fab Four journey, along with amazing theme music from Black Rabbit. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everybody has a story.
And so when I came up with the music, I just had it on my iPhone. I always imagined Ringo playing on it. You know, I could hear him playing on it, and so I finished the song. I even had another friend of mine come and play drums on it, which sounded great, you know. But then I thought, I'll ask Ringo if he'll play on it. So I just, did that. Called and said, would he play on the song? And, yeah, send it over, yeah, great.
Today's guest is Colin Hay, a Scottish-born musician, singer, songwriter, and actor. He first came to prominence as the lead vocalist of the Australian rock band Men at Work. The group formed in Melbourne in 1978 and released their first LP, Business as Usual, in 1981. Their big break came in August 1982 when Men at Work toured Canada and the US to promote the album, supporting Fleetwood Mac. That October, their song, Who Can It Be Now, reached number 1 on the US Billboard Hot 100. In January 1983, they became the first Australian artist to have a simultaneous number 1 album and number 1 single on the US Billboard charts with Business as Usual and the song Down Under. Their second album, Cargo, released in 1983, was also an international bestseller, spawning such hits as Overkill and Be Good Johnny. Their third album, Two Hearts, released in 1985, reached the top 20 in Australia and the top 50 in the US, preceding the band's breakup. During their time together, Men at Work won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist in 1983, and they were inducted into the Australian Music Hall of Fame in 1984, selling over 30 million albums worldwide. As a solo artist, Hay's music has been used frequently by actor and director Zach Braff in his work, which helped establish a career rebirth for the musician in the mid-2000s. Hay has also been a recurring member of Ringo's Starr and his All-Starr band. In 2015, Colin Hay, Waiting for My Real Life, a documentary film about the singer, debuted at the Melbourne International Film Festival. In 2022, he released his 15th solo album. Entitled Now and the Evermore, Ringo Starr played drums on the LP's title track. Welcome, Colin Hay. Welcome to the program. Can you tell us what turned you on to music?
Well, I was surrounded by it, really, because my mother and father had a music shop in Scotland, southwest coast of Scotland. So they had this music shop between the years of 1958 and 1967. So I didn't have far to look. Everywhere, I turned, there was something musical: pianos, guitars, drums, and records, of course.
Was the guitar your first instrument?
The recorder. Actually, no, the piano. The piano, and of course, it's my biggest regret that I gave up piano because I wanted to go out on the street and play football with my friends. And my father told me that I would always regret it, and he was right.
And so you're playing guitar at what? How early of an age?
I took it up like around the age of 12.
Okay, so it wasn't like when you were 5 or anything like that.
No, I played the piano for a while, and then I they had recorder at school, but I think I was probably around. I mean, it could have been a little bit earlier, but that's my memory, is that I started to take lessons from this girl who was a bit older than me, played the violin, and she could also play guitar, and so she lived in the next town from me. So I used to go up on a Saturday morning and take lessons from her on a Saturday. So I was about 12 years old then, I think.
Well, as you know, our show is called Everything Fab Four. Can you tell me about your earliest moment when you heard of this thing called Beatles?
Well, again, it was to do with the shop, with my mother's store. I think I was 9, I think, when I first heard of the Beatles, when they first came out with, of course, in Britain, they had all the records, as I say, in the correct order, not like they did over here. So I was aware of Love Me Do, but She Loves You was the song that really still first got me and interested in the Beatles. And from that point on, I was pretty hooked, really.
And was that when you really turned up your interest in the guitar, or was that already in progress?
It was, let me think, what was it? No, it was around the same time, really. I learned how to play House of the Rising Sun, which is a great song to learn when you're first learning guitar, because it has quite a lot of different chords in it that you need down the bottom, basic chords, and it had the F chord, which is quite difficult to play when you first start playing. I remember, I had a poster on the wall like everyone did, and George was playing a bar chord, and I was so fascinated with what he was doing, because it looked like his fingers were doing all kinds of strange things. And of course, he was just playing, I think, a G chord, a bar chord. But yeah, that was really, I loved I just loved, in my rather, innocent state at that particular time, I loved the way they sounded. It was just a world that I wanted to belong to in however and whatever way I could. I wanted to, and they gave you insight into the fact that there was another world apart from the one that we knew, which was made up of of all your senses. There was something else that existed, which was somewhat, magical and exciting to me. I think that one of the songs which really, Strawberry Fields was later, of course, and that was released, I think, before I went to Australia. We emigrated to Australia, but I remember that song just being, having something that I just thought, oh, this is too much. This is just incredible. What, just the way the song sounded, and it coincided, I think, with John Lennon bringing out Spaniard in the Works, the book that he had, that I just loved so much, because it played so much with the English language, and it was just so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I teach a course here at Monmouth on the life and times of the Beatles, really concentrating on the years of their musical production. And one of the things that's tough to explain to the students that you might have that you will have insight about, I know, is She Loves You, when it comes out in August 1963 and breaks all sorts of UK records. Why was it that song seems so different and galvanized people?
I think it was probably a lot of things. It's never one thing, is it? It's always a combination of things that comes to some kind of perfect storm of creativity or something, and who can really say, about what it was about that song, if people really knew how to measure that or put it in a bottle, of course, they would. But it starts off with a drum fill, am I correct?
Absolutely.
And there you go. So there's Ringo who starts it. And then it starts off with a chorus, which is very interesting also. So you've immediately got the hook of the song. Girls, of course, imagined that they were singing about them. And I remember listening to that when I went to one of my first little dances that I went to. I think I was quite young, and I went to this, and I heard walking in, and it was just full of, kids my age. And it was just so exciting. It was, I think it was also that sound that they had, which was really greater than each individual person. There was, McCartney and Lennon, of course, great songwriters, great voices, and McCartney played the bass like nobody else, and Lennon was a great guitar player. Perhaps people don't realize that what a great guitar player he was, but he was. And then, the combination of them was one thing, but then it seemed to be, when you used to listen to the Beatles, you'd think, well, who's that singing? And it was, when they would sing together, it was like something else. It was like a sound that you hadn't really heard before, and it was just them singing together. And I guess they'd been singing together for 3 years pretty solidly. So I don't know, you just create this entity or something, and it was just that, and that song sparked up the world. And it was really it's also really it's more of an intricate song than you imagine when you actually sit down and try and play it. It's really quite sophisticated in many ways.
Well, that bit that George Harrison plays to accent the chorus is staggering and hard to play.
Down, 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 down.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's tough to do.
Yeah. It's really, it's when you hear it, you think, oh, simple, not so simple.
No, not at all. And not only is it not simple to play it, but imagine being the person who dreamt it up.
Yeah. Well, he did a lot of that.
I talk a lot in class about authorship and what that means. And no offense to Lennon and McCartney, but when you look at their songs, Ringo authors that great drum fill at the beginning of, not drum fill, but cadence at the beginning of Come Together. It's not even the same song without it. Or Harrison, over and over, particularly in those early years, is adding these accents and adornments like Please, Please Me. Those things carry the song.
Yeah, I know. It's, that's a subject in itself, isn't it? What makes a song. It's very, very, very intricate and very interesting, and I don't know whether there is one answer to that, but definitely one of the great things that set them apart from a lot of other people, especially where Ringo was concerned, is that of course he always played the song, but he has such amazing artistic instincts with whatever he played, that he wasn't really playing, he was playing the drums, obviously, and he loved the drums, but he played the drums like he was playing an instrument which was an integral part of the structure of the song, he wasn't just playing a beat to the song, All those parts are so memorable and integral. And I'm sure they didn't take that long to come up with, Here's what I'm going to play. Boom, there it is. And no one else did that. And the same with all of them, really. But especially George's parts were, as you say, completely memorable. And as you say, part of it. And you can't really imagine that song without those sounds, without those riffs, without those lead parts and everything else that he contributed.
It was sure wonderful seeing George play in the new Get Back documentary, where you see him actually arranging with Billy Preston many of those songs in the last week or so. Did you get a chance to check out the Get Back doc?
Yes, and how extraordinary that was, all of it. I need to watch the whole thing again, which I really want to do soon. But you realize, especially when you're watching the first one, you think to yourself, oh, it was, even if you're the Beatles, it was tedious a lot of the time. There was a whole lot of nothing going on for quite long periods of time. And that's what it is to be in a band. And but everything that happened was, it was really extraordinary. A lot of things, like just even trying to find the 8-track recorder and all that business, and the Beach Boys have got the one that's in town, and those moments where you couldn't really write it, where all of a sudden Billy Preston arrives and the first thing he plays is exactly what they need and exactly what they want, and you can just see it in their faces, and they go, "Oh, this is the missing ingredient," and so it was.
It is. It's just magic to watch and to see what Big Mal roaming in and out.
My God, what a head! What a head he had.
What was it like for you to then move, like you said, halfway around the world, or all the way around the world?
Yeah, all the way around the world, pretty much.
When you were so young, really, you were 14 or 17?
Yeah, 14. Yeah.
What?
Well, that was a couple of things. That was a momentous year for me, because Sgt. Pepper was released, and I moved to Australia. So it was, I was moving away from something. I was moving away from the geographical center where that music was created, but I was moving towards something else, which was the other side of the world, which was the new world to me, and somewhere which had its own kind of excitement, to it. So it was. But I remember just listening endlessly to that record during that year, because it was. Somewhat wistfully, my mother and father didn't have the shop anymore, but there was indeed a lot of fervor in Melbourne where I moved to, and indeed I met some musicians straight away, and so I felt quite at home quite quickly there when I moved there.
Were you already writing songs at that point?
Yeah, I think I was, at least just pretty soon after I got there. I started playing in this little folk club, and I wrote some songs. People tell me I was writing songs, people who've known me for a long time, but to be quite honest, I don't really remember any of them. I wish I did, but I really don't. I can't remember, all those. There was quite a lot of songs that I wrote, but I don't really have any memory of them.
You're in Australia now, and what brought you there? Was it a parental change in career or something, or I don't.
My mother and father. Well, there was a lot of that, from Britain in the 60s. People wanted to get away from Britain because it was so bleak, and my father got sick of the weather, and he wanted to, have a better life for his family, and they also offered what they called an assisted passage, which would only cost you £10 to go to Australia for each person in the family. So that was an added impetus to go there, because the government of Australia needed to increase the workforce. It was quite a racist kind of policy they had. They only took people from Britain, white people, and then they didn't realize that they weren't getting enough people, so they had to expand that over the decades. But as they did, consequently, Australia became a much more interesting place.
So you find this music scene, and it must be. Is it a while, or is it pretty soon that you get into the kind of orbit that's going to create men at work?
No, it's quite a long time, really. I played in some school bands, with friends of mine, and I was always planning to, it wasn't something that I consciously thought, oh, I'm going to be a musician or I'm going to write songs, but that was just the path that I saw in front of me. And my parents, of course, had different ideas, and they wanted me to, become a professional of some kind, but not a professional musician. Although my father had been on the stage, and so he really knew what it was to be on the stage, but they didn't really want that for me, or they. It was an interesting thing because they supported me in the sense that they paid for singing lessons for me when I was at school. But I think that was all very well when it was seen to be something that I was doing as a hobby. But as soon as I, was showing signs that I wanted to do it for a living, I think they got a little worried. But so when I left school, I think the early 70s, I went up to Sydney to try and make it as a musician and a singer in a band, and I realized quite quickly that this was going to be harder than I thought it was going to be to achieve what I wanted to achieve. So I came back to Melbourne, and I had deferred university. So I'd taken a year off to go and try and make it as a musician. And I came back to Melbourne pretty much with my tail between my legs. And I decided to go back to school, which pleased my parents. So I went to university in Melbourne, and I thought, well, while I'm there, I can plot and scheme and figure out how to get this music thing together. So I did a degree in arts and so forth. Nothing really much. Nothing that was going to do anything to help me get a job when I left university, but it certainly gave me time to strategize, if you like, and write songs and meet different people. And so it was very good for that. I really enjoyed it for that reason. And plus, I got an arts degree, which is, whatever it is. I finished it, and then I think that was around 77, and then I got a job in the chorus of a musical called Ned Kelly, and just before I went off to do that, I'd met Ron Strikett, the other guitar player in Men at Work, and he was a beautiful 12-string guitar player, and a little light went off when I met him, and said, we should work together when I come back after doing the musical. So that's what we did. I came back and we started working as an acoustic duo, and we wrote songs together, and including Down Under, and went from there. And the band formed about a year after that. So it was really quite 10 years or so before anything really happened where I could call myself a musician in any kind of professional capacity, or semi-professional capacity.
We'll be back with more from Colin Hay after these messages. We're back with Colin Hay on Everything Fab 4. I've had the pleasure to see you perform live many, many times, and also with Men at Work. I remember in 1982, Fleetwood Mac did a very short tour, and my father was wonderful and generous and took me. But the highlight for us that night, as much as we both loved and love Fleetwood Mac, was Men at Work, whom I had not heard of. This was in Houston, Texas. It was, you talk about earlier about how the Beatles sounded different. I really felt like Men at Work sounded different in 1982.
I think we did. I think we did sound different. I think that was one of the reasons why people took to us. It was a different sound, and we were certainly influenced by a lot of people, including the Beatles. Obviously, I always had a great love of melody and trying to string bits of songs together that made sense, chordally and structurally. So I think a lot of that came from listening to the Beatles so much and what they did with bridges and middle eights and choruses and verses and so forth. So, and also, seeming simplicity. A lot of people, I think, tend to sometimes think of us as being a band that our songs were quite simple, but I think they were deceptively so. But yeah, that was a great tour. I think it was a 2-month tour or something, 2 or 3 months, or 2 months at least, where we opened up for Fleetwood Mac, and that was a great education for us. Who Can It Be Now was I think at the end of that tour ended up going to #1 just as we finished that opening spot for Fleetwood Mac. So the timing couldn't have been better.
Well, it was an incredible night of music, quite frankly. I mean, I remember your set because it had, and this is, I think, true of your entire canon of work. It has an emotional range to it. There's sadness, there's beauty, there's whimsy, there's humor, there's fun. It's all there. And so there was a taste of that certainly that night. And then, of course, you got to watch Lindsey Buckingham drive this band. That was a big eye opener for Fleetwood Mac. We had no idea that he really drove that band in the way he did.
Yeah, especially then. He was in his prime.
Right, with that one little guitar.
Yeah, the Rick the Model 1.
That's right.
Made by Rick Turner. Yeah.
Now, did and he was in his Mirage video, for Hold Me outfit the entire time, I recall. How did the video age help Men at Work?
Well, I wouldn't say it was more than the icing on the cake, but it was instrumental in cementing our success, that's for sure, because we were first and foremost a radio band, because the radio really started playing our music pretty solidly and pretty heavily before MTV picked up on us. But of course, MTV was just starting, and they didn't have all that many videos at that time, to be honest. Not that many people made them. But they really played us because we were playing on the radio, because we were already getting played on the radio. I don't know whether they would have done the same if the songs hadn't have been having a major impact at radio. So, but it was really, again, very synchronistic and very a perfect storm of events that caused our seemingly overnight success.
A 10-year overnight success for Colin Hay, right?
Yeah, yeah, and then some.
I do think the timing makes so much sense, because there was so much 80s music that would follow you that I don't think had the same level of complexity. So you sort of did have a platform that belonged to you there for a moment. Who Can It Be Now was in constant rotation, I recall, as a kid watching MTV, and then Down Under, of course, et cetera, et cetera. So how does a band like that run its course? You guys, I suppose, stopped working together. Was it around 1988 the first time?
No, it was over really quickly. The band was done really at the end of 1983. Yeah. We never really played together as a band after the end of 1983. So it's very short-lived. It lasted from around the middle of 79 until the end of 1983, and then in '84, the rhythm section got sacked. The drummer and bass player got sacked, and that was really. That's a complicated story, really, but I'll try and make it simple. Is that the Men at Work was 6 people. There were 5 musicians and 1 manager, and the manager, Russell, was my friend who I'd met at university, who said then in 1976, if you ever get a band together, I'll hustle for you. So that was the basis of our deal, really. And then when we became very famous in 1982, 1983, the rhythm section, Jerry and John, they didn't really care for Russell that much and wanted to either sack him or put him on a salary instead of commissioning. And, it was just, he was my friend and I wasn't going to go along with that. So it was just one of those things where it was these camps, different camps within the band started to appear, and, fissures started to appear within the band. And, it just kind of, it just didn't feel like a band anymore. It felt weird and strange, and I wanted to leave. And Russell said, well, what are you going to leave for? It's your band. And we got to the end of the 1983 tour, and we all just went home. And then Greg and Ron and I and Russell got together and decided that we wanted to keep going, but we didn't want to work with Jerry and John anymore. So they got the sack, which in retrospect was probably quite a big mistake. Not only in sacking them, but in the way we did it. We probably should have sat down with some kind of mediating force and worked out the issues, because the issues weren't really that important. They really never are in bands, everything becomes Spinal Tap very quickly, and you don't think it will, but it really does. And so really the Men at Work was really that combination of people, the five musicians and Russell. That's really what Men at Work was for me. We made another album, Greg and Ron and I, although Ron left halfway through that album, and he just went home one day and didn't come back. And then the third album came out and didn't do much. And then Greg had enough, and it was just, it just kind of, there was no band left. And so no band left to leave. So it was really done by then. It was, certainly when Greg left, I think Greg left, in 84, 85 or something. And I didn't really want to be in Men at Work anymore. I was quite relieved, to be honest.
Well, as I always say to our students, creative differences, business differences, all of this stuff is real. And back in those pre-internet 80s, right, when information was scarce, I looked at each new album coming out thinking, hey, they're alive and well,
Yeah. Well, looking back on those two records we did, Ron was a really inventive, interesting guitar player and didn't sound like anyone else. Jerry, the drummer Jerry, was heavily influenced by Phil Collins, but was also a great drummer in his own right. And Greg was a wonderful musician, wonderful sax player, and had his own sound. And I've worked with many musicians since that time, and everyone plays that saxophone hook. Who can it be now? Their own way, but nobody plays it like Greg. And so everyone had their thing within that band, and so I think that's really what went towards. I'd say, for example, I took the song "Who Can It Be Now" or "Down Under" or "Overkill" to the band, and here's the song, and I played the original saxophone line on guitar, and you take it to rehearsal on a Tuesday, and you go, here's a song, and you would play it that night, and when you would play out at wherever you were playing, because everyone just fell into what they did, and all of a sudden, there is the song. Not only there is the song, but there is everyone's contribution to it, including, say, Greg playing the sax line, which all of a sudden, takes it to another level.
Well, and his saxophone adornments always coalesce so well with your voice.
That's right. That is correct. And it's funny you say that, because I met Greg before he started playing the saxophone, and I would go and visit him in this house he lived in, which was, 15 or 20 minutes from where I lived. And this is during the 70s when I was at university, and he was at college as well. And he lived, and he used to practice out in the back room of the house that he shared with these other people. And I'd go visit, and I'd say, it's Greg here, and they go in and looking for Greg to say hi. And they go, oh yeah, he's practicing. So I would just let him practice. I would just hang in the house because I knew the other people there, and I would listen to him for a while. And it really it's funny you should say that, because the way he played and the sound that he had, it really reminded me of my voice. Huh. And I would listen to him for a while. And I thought then, well, if I ever do something, I'll get Greg to play with me, because I loved him as a person. He was a great guy, and he was a great entertainer, great performer. But he also played interesting instruments. He could play guitar. He could play everything pretty much. He could play guitar, could play keyboards, but flute and sax were his instruments. But he did have his own particular sound on the sax, which I really loved. It's funny. I was in the studio the other day, and I pulled up a track that he played on when we were touring together in 2000, 22 years ago or something. And I hadn't listened to it for years, and it made me upset. It was very upsetting, to be honest, because I was unprepared for it. And he was talking as well on the track, so I had them speaking and playing. It was quite, it was a moment.
It must have felt like a voice beyond the grave, right? In many ways.
Yeah, but it was just very. It was very. It was like he was dead. He was alive. He was so alive. He was alive. It's funny because I hear him every day. I hear him when I go into supermarkets all the time, and so he's never far away.
How did so tell me how your collaboration with Ringo and the All-Starr band, how that came about? That's been such a fruitful experience. I've seen you guys twice on various legs of your tours.
Well, I was just driving along. Where was I? I was driving on Santa Monica Boulevard. Or was it? It was Santa Monica Boulevard. And I got a call and asking if I wanted to go out, or actually asking me if I wanted to talk to the musical director from Ringo's band, and would I like to go on tour? And so, you kind of think about it for 3 seconds and say, yes, I'd like to do that. So that was in 2003, and that's how it came about, And what they do and what he does. He kind of oversees everything, and you have to have had hits on your own, and you have to be able to still play them and still sing, and still stand up straight. And so I just did that one tour, and then didn't get asked back. So I did a television special with him, but I thought, oh well, maybe once is enough. If that's all that he wanted from me, that's cool, I thought maybe he was less than in love with what I did, but that was maybe just a moment that I had. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but anyway, they asked me to come back in 2008, and I did that, and then I didn't get asked back for another 10 years. And mind you, I'm not sitting around. I'm not sitting around waiting for the call. There were lots of other things that were happening, but But it is always nice to get the call, So I got the call again in 2018, and I've been doing it since then. Mind you, it's been interrupted by the pandemic, but we got a couple of tours in before that virus hit, and we're going back out in this year, May, June.
I love watching you guys, and I love first of all, the whole idea of the All-Starr Band is brilliant, right? It's a way to curate wonderful music and bring it together. And my wife and I loved, we saw you in Atlantic City, I think, the last time. And just the way that, you step up and would sing on Toto songs or, or Oye Como Va or whatever. Yeah. It's a blast.
Completely, yeah. I mean, those songs that's the other thing is you get to be a sideman for everyone else's songs, which is, it's good for you. It's good for you to play other people's songs.
And Ringo seems to be out having an absolute blast.
Well, he does, he does. And you turn around and, in my case, if I'm playing Who Can It Be Now or Down Under and he's playing along and with Bissonette, and he's always engaging, he's always looking at you, and you always know that he's into it 100%.
I'm very excited about your new album. Your song with Ringo, of course, is now available. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It seems, and maybe I'm going too far with this, so correct me when I'm wrong, but one of the things I love about your solo shows is they're a combination of amazing, wonderful music, but also your kind of deadpan delivery about not just your story, but all of our stories about life and the ups and downs, et cetera. And this one seems to have a philosophical bent to it.
Well, it was written, the lyrics anyway were written, when the pandemic hit. And it was kind of, there was that moment where before they had the vaccine.
Yes.
And everyone was kind of, justifiably so, kind of freaking out and thinking, well, this has the potential to kill me. So everything became quite, focused. Everything came into focus, who you loved, who you wanted to spend time with, who you didn't want to spend time with. And there was an immediacy about things, about just being careful, but getting things done. And so I think that song just, the lyrics anyway came along about mortality in that sense of trying to, it's, in a lot of ways, it's like trying to make sense of the senseless. When you think about that, when you think ahead, when you think about, okay, the little bit before you pass on, or the fact, the universe keeps going without me. How rude. And just things like telling people that you love, that you love them, in fact, and being in the moment, so to speak. And the idea that perhaps this was what life was going to be now, that feeling of, this is just going to be, we're going to be faced with this from this point on.
Right. Like I now live in a dystopian novel.
Yeah. And, we're going to have to keep masks on. We're going to have to not shake people's hands anymore and keep our distance, and which is a very wise thing to do, but it's a very different way to live from what we've known. And musically, it was something that took me back to when I was a child, I guess, because there used to be a Salvation Army that used to sing outside my door every day. And musically, it just took me back to that part of my life, to that time in my life, when, of course, I was being, mesmerized by the Beatles. So even melodically, it's. I think it's really unashamedly influenced by the Beatles, and so when I came up with the music, I just had it on my iPhone. I always imagined Ringo playing on it. You know, I could hear him playing on it, and so I finished the song. I even had another friend of mine come and play drums on it, which sounded great. You know, but then I thought, oh, I'll ask Ringo if he'll play on it. So I just, did that. Called and said, would he play on the song? And, yeah, send it over. Yeah, great. So, so that's what happened.
Onward, Christian soldiers.
Yeah. Marching us to war with the cross of Jesus.
Everything Fab 4 is presented by Salon.com, the premier news, politics, innovation, and arts website. For more information, visit everythingfab4.com, where you can learn more about our podcast and my latest Beatles-related book, Living the Beatles Legend, The Untold Story of Mal Evans. The Everything Fab 4 theme song, Seize the Day, is provided courtesy of Black Rabbit, the high-octane Beatles cover band, an innovative psychedelic rock project from Rockaway Beach, Queens in New York City. Like what you heard today on Everything Fab 4? Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, and recommend the show to your friends. Plus, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EF4 Podcast. Distributed by Salon.com, Everything Fab 4 is a Wonderwall production. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story.